Aggregation uses a pipeline in MongoDB. And if you're familiar with the Unix world, you probably know what pipes look like. For instance, if I wanted to look in a directory and find the size of every subdirectory in it, du-s star piped to sort -n, that would numerically sort the size of the subdirectories and print them on my screen. So that's the Unix world of pipes. And we have a similar idea of a pipeline here. At the very top is your collection. And for instance, that products collection is sent through document by document. The documents are piped through this processing pipeline, and they go through a series of stages, and then we eventually get a result set. Now, the one stage I showed you is the group stage, which is going to do the aggregations. But there are lots of other stages. There's a potential sorting stage and a matching stage where we filter for documents. I'm going to go through each one real briefly to explain how it works. But these stages can appear multiple times inside the pipeline. If you recall, when I showed you that aggregation command, there was an array inside the function call. And the reason there was an array is that each of the items in that array is a stage of the pipeline that is going to transform that collection. So let's go through what the different possible stages are of an aggregation pipeline at the high level, and then we're going to dig in to each one individually, and I'll show you what it does. All right, so the first one is $project, and it doesn't have to be the first one, but often it is the first one. And a $project is going to select out which keys you're interested in. It can also reshape the document, and I'll show you how that works. If you want to change its form a little bit, taking something out of a hierarchical document and putting it at the high level, you can do it with $project. Now, $project, for every document that $project sees, it sends out one document. So it's 1-to-1. If it sees 10 documents, it produces 10 documents. Now, the next one is a $match. They don't have to be in this order in the pipeline. And the match is going to filter. So for instance, in the case I showed you with products, if I was only interested in products by Apple, I could filter early on in the pipeline and make sure that I'm only looking at the documents that have the manufacturer being Apple. So that's what match is going to do. I can group, of course, which you saw, and this is going to be your aggregation functions. Now, filter, for every document that filter sees, it may only see a subset. So for instance, it might see 100 documents, and then it might actually produce 25 documents. With aggregation, same thing is true, because it's aggregating, so it's grouping by a certain key, so it may not produce as many documents as it sees. So I'll call this n-to-1 since it reduces the number of documents down a bit, or can reduce the number of documents. And then there's a sort stage, and the sorting stage does exactly what you could imagine. It sorts, and that's 1-to-1. Every document it sees, it produces another document. And then there's a skip stage, and the skip stage can skip forward. It only makes sense after you sort, and just skips. I mean, I don't know how to explain that other than skipping. And again, this is not 1-to-1. This is n-to-1 because, of course, if you skip forward 10, then you aren't going to produce all the documents. You're going to produce a subset of the documents. There's a limit stage, and that limit stage is going to limit the number of documents produced. Again, it's used usually with skip. You might skip forward 10 and then limit myself to showing 3 documents. And that's also going to be usually limit the number of documents that comes through the pipeline in some way. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's one more operator, and that is unwind, which we're going to get into much more completely later. What unwind does, in MongoDB, we've got these documents that can have sub-arrays inside them, sort of pre-joined data. And what unwind does is it unjoins the data. So you can imagine that if you had, let's say, a blog post with tags, and tags were sports and outdoors and summer, what unwind will do is when it encounters a document and you're going to unwind in a particular key, like it might unwind on tags, it's going to produce a document for every single one of these sub-elements with everything else repeated. So it basically normalizes the data again so that you can more easily aggregate it, is what it does. So this is going to create an explosion of documents. So I might have one document with 3 keys, and it might produce 3 documents going through the unwind stage. So I'm going to say 1 to n. We'll go through every single one of these stages does. I want to point out that you can have a stage exist more than once. So you could decide to match on documents. You can then group them. Then you could match again. You could then sort them. You could skip them. You could even unwind them over and over again if you wanted to do that. And I'll show you some cases where that might be interesting. But for now, I just want you to understand that the aggregation system uses a pipeline concept, and that pipeline has various operators that can run on the documents, and that you can conceptually think of the documents as coming in the left side, getting transformed through these stages, and then getting a result set from that. And so far, we looked only at the grouping operator, but we're going to go through them all. Okay, it is time for a quiz. And I think this quiz is going to be pretty straightforward. Which of the following are stages in the aggregation pipeline? Check all that apply. Match, transpose, group, skip, limit, sort, project, and unwind. Just check all that apply.